We don't have a swear button. If everyone in the audience could please have a seat, we're going to get started in about 1 minute.
I heard that, John. It might just be struggling with the ambient noise, but I'm using it off my phone.
Are you all set? Lucas, are you all set? Lucas, are you all set? You good?
Maybe.
You good to start?
I think we're good to start.
Good evening and welcome to the second forum of the Lincoln County News and Boothbay Register of our 2024 candidates series. My name is John Roberts, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight representing the Lincoln County News as the publisher. I would like to thank the town of Dresden for the space, as well as all the candidates for traveling here, and what a great response with the community from the audience. So thank you for all your willingness to attend and to participate. This year, in addition to creating some of our own questions, we solicited some suggestions from our readers to see what issues would be on the forefront of our potential voters. I will pose a question to the group, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. I will hold up a piece of yellow paper when we have 30 seconds left, and then a piece of red paper indicating that your time is up. We would ask that the audience refrain from any outbursts or antagonistic behavior towards any of the candidates. And in a minute, I'm going to ask all the candidates to introduce themselves. Everyone will have 2 minutes to respond. And we'd like to ask the audience to please refrain from applause until the end of each question for all the candidates to have a chance to respond. So tonight we have 3 candidates from Senate District 24, which consists of Dresden and all of Saginaw County. We have Suzanne Andresen, who's unenrolled from West Bath. We have Jeffrey Pierce, a Republican from Dresden. And we have Denise Tepler, a Democrat from Woolwich, West. Topsom, sorry. I can't quite see that. And then we also have one candidate from House District 53, Judy Tunkel, and Representative Michael Lemon Lemelin was at our Wiscasset Forum last Thursday, and there was a scheduling conflict. So they couldn't get them both in the same room at the same time, so apologize for that. But we will have that up online, so you'll be able to see both candidates' responses to the same questions. So with that, I would like to open up for introductions. And Suzanne, can you get us started?
Of course. Thanks for having me, certainly having all of us here this evening. My name is Susanna Dresden. I'm from West Bath. I have chosen to be an unenrolled candidate because I don't believe you need a party to represent the people. My goal is to certainly provide transparency and work to represent the entire community, regardless of your party. There's some of my passions are surrounding housing and some of our elder residents. I think we could have done a little bit better on our stabilization plan, on how we manage that and trying to fix the taxes for the residents. You should believe they are our foundation to Maine and not tax them out of living in their homes. And so we need to find a way to manage that appropriately for them. But I also have a passion for the housing for our workforce and hourly employees. I am fortunate to be entrenched in the real estate space. And I'm one of the owners of a national real estate publication. I connect with investors across the country. And I'm currently sourcing to investors to invest in this community, in this state, to help provide workforce housing. I think it's important that we reduce the barriers for that. We are, even when you look at West Bath, which is in my area where my husband actually works there, and at the IW, they tried to hire 700 employees and it could only keep 161 because the others had to leave from housing. And so we definitely have a stipulation not only in Saginaw County and Dresden, but also in the entire state. We have a housing shortage of about 86,000 homes, and it's going to be very difficult for us to maintain that and meet that if we don't really put our heads down and try and figure out the best way to accomplish that for the community. So that's certainly one of my opportunities to work with you all. I'd love to hear from you and what you're looking for as well. I'm here to support you.
And next, go ahead, Jeff.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Lincoln County News for sponsoring this event tonight and the town of Dresden for hosting it. My name's Jeff Pierce. I'm from the town of Dresden. I'm the planning board chair in town. I own a construction company and I'm a realtor. We need to work on taxes. We need to work to bring technical and vocational education back to the state of Maine so that we can have companies come here and we have a trained workforce. It all starts with good jobs and being able to come in and have those companies help pay the tax base. Without a trained workforce, we're going to suffer high property taxes. We need to fix our education. We were ranking really low nationally. So when we say all this, we talk about housing. It all revolves in housing, the tradespeople. We're going to go back to vocational training and technical. There's no housing. There's no tradespeople. Everybody on the crew's got hair my color now. There's no electricians, plumbers. Try and hire one. So that's one of the building blocks to getting the state back on track. And with that, we can start lowering our tax. We've got to lower our taxes, guys. The state of Maine, 2019 was at $7.1 billion they took in. They spent. They're at 10.6 billion now. That's a lot. So let's talk about what we can do to fix things. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Denise.
Hi, I'm Denise Tepler. Good evening. Thanks very much, John, for organizing this and all of Lincoln County News. Good evening to Dresden residents and the folks online watching this. I've been really impressed with the way that Dresden comes together as a community. I'm getting to know this town, and it's one of my favorites. Not only is it beautiful, but you all really work together to solve problems, and I appreciate that. I've lived in Topsom for 41 years, so I've been around a while in Saginaw County and even in this area. Known the Gorensons for a long time. My kids were in plays with the Gorenson kids as they were growing up, the Johansons. So Dresden has become a community that I'm getting more and more familiar with and that I appreciate. My focus when I was in the legislature previously was affordable health care. I was the House Chair of the Health Coverage, Insurance, and Financial Services Committee for 4 years. I spent 8 years as Topsom State Representative. I've also served as a school board member and on a town finance committee, and I'm very involved in my community in a variety of volunteer roles with Mid-Coast Hunger Prevention Program, with the Maine Public Health Association, and other organizations in our communities that hopefully make a difference. I would very much like to earn your vote. So if you have questions about what I believe, what I think, I'd appreciate you contacting me. And thank you very much for being here this evening.
And last but not least, Judy, would you care to take the floor?
And I too am grateful to Lincoln County News and to all of you people being here to support this conversation with us tonight. And I am a new person in politics, so I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my path, which has been a lot of detours. And some of the detours have been adventures, and some of them have been difficult, and some of them have been painful. But what I've learned from all of the different tracks that I've been on is that community is really important. I was raised in New York State, but my family was from New England. I was born in Boston, and I was constantly reminded that home was either Western Massachusetts or Southern New Hampshire. And neither of them really felt like home for me until one year when I was about 11. We took a vacation to Maine, and on the way home, my dad gave me some money and sent me up some stairs and said, go up there and see if you can get those shoes that you wanted. So I went upstairs, and this nice old man helped me pick out some shoes from a catalog. And as I walked down the stairs, I knew two things. I knew that man had to be LL, and I also knew that Maine was the part of New England that I wanted to claim as my home. So when Paul and I got married, we very shortly, on a whim, moved to Maine. We ended up in Rockland during a recession, and managed to survive. We bought a house in Union, and I ran a licensed family daycare home while my kids were being born and were young. And Paul decided that he wanted to be a minister, and the bishop said, okay, you go to General Seminary in New York City. And that was hard, taking 3 rural kids to New York City, but we survived. And I lived in New Jersey and North Carolina and Louisiana. And while I was in Louisiana, I got my master's degree.
And our time's up, if you can.
And I was almost done. And so in Maryland, I had a small business as a private practice therapist. And COVID is the reason why I decided to go into politics, because I was able to.
I gotta stop you to keep everyone
Okay.
fair, so just save that for the
I was
conclusion,
able.
please.
Okay, sorry. First time I've done this.
No problem. Is everyone able to see the cards as I'm holding them up?
Yeah.
And then I think Suzanne, if you can speak a little closer to the mic.
I can do that.
Thank you. So we'll start with a question about your campaign. While talking with the voters in the lead up to the election, what are some of the topics or issues that have been brought up most frequently to you? And if elected, how would you hope to address them in the legislature? And we'll start with candidate Andreessen.
So one of the elements that I actually want to agree with Jeff on a topic he talked about with the education is we are helping to support associate college degrees and paying for that. And I think we should take that a step down and help our juniors and seniors in high school. There's a shortage of the tech schools, and when there's only 2 openings for welding and there's 18 kids that want it, or they want to get into some of the automotive programs and nursing, we don't seem to have the capacity to accommodate that. and that's a significant disservice to the students. I think we need to find a way to expand that program, because not all of them want to go off to college and get an associate's degree, and we should capture their interests while they have the ability and interest to do that while they're in high school. And I think we need to, find a way to do that. Our students, and again, it's a very similar foundation. We're going to lose our elder residents if we can't reduce their real estate taxes and make it more cost effective, even with the energy costs that we have here. Maine's got a significant cost of energy, and we're not accommodating that. And I look at some of these grants that are beginning out, and we were trying to hand out the heat pumps, and those cost even more. And what's going to happen when we don't have the capacity to pay the bills, to pay the energy, to pay the real estate taxes? We attempted stabilization, it didn't go well. And so we need to find ways, whether we fix the education with our students, who is our younger foundation coming up, and we manage to embrace our elder folks and make sure that their interests and real estate taxes and the taxes to live in the state are able to keep them here forever. We shouldn't be risking their homestead and saying that we'll take it out of the sale of the property when they pass, when that homestead's been in their family for generations. That's unacceptable to me, and that is not a solution. That's a problem.
Thank you. And we'll, each question will go down the line with whoever we start with. We'll work our way that way.
Thank you, John. So, we've knocked about 3,900 doors. Property tax in the last 3 weeks has been number one. In schools, especially in the Richmond area, it's been number two. So I'm going to start out with the schools. We're going to talk about technical education and vocational. We need tradespeople. BIW calls for 800 men. They get about 200. That's unacceptable. What company would want to come to the state of Maine when we are so business unfriendly? We need to reduce some red tape in Augusta. We need to get back to basics so that businesses want to come here. And that means working on our energy costs, means working on our education, and being able to have people. Look, some of these great jobs out there. When was the last time you guys hired a plumber? They're $120 an hour now. Some lawyers aren't worth that, right? I'm sorry, I'm serious. I mean, I'd rather have my plumber and then a lawyer some days. But electricians, heat pumps, all this stuff is going to need to be replaced. We're gonna have to take care of it. Who's gonna do it? We gotta get technical schools, vocational training back into our schools. That's a cost we need to work on. Then with the property tax, I'm gonna skip through it real quick. We need to bring back the cap on property tax. It was taken out in the legislature in 2023. They lifted the cap from Prop 1, which was passed by a citizens initiative, 2005. That needs to come back.
Thank you, John. So the question is, what are you hearing from the voters as you're going around during this campaign? And so I've been knocking on doors in every community in Saginaw County and this community in Lincoln County. And I would say that there are real differences between the communities about the interests of people. On the coast in Georgetown and in Phippsburg, people are very worried about their working waterfront and limitations on access to water for fishermen and for the people who work on the water. And that's a real issue there. And then when I get to a lot of the more interior communities, people are desperately worried about the cost of living. And what I have to say about that is I can't do anything specifically about the exorbitant grocery prices that people are facing as a legislator. But what I can do is focus on building our economy. And I believe that there are 3 things that we need to move our economy forward in Maine. And what we need is housing, as both these folks have spoken about. We need affordable housing and we need workforce housing. So we need both of those things. Right now, BIW got smart and they're building some workforce housing in Brunswick, which is terrific. The other two things we need are childcare, because people can't work unless their children are taken care of safely. So that's a very important thing, and it's very difficult to find good, safe childcare now in Maine. And the final thing, the third thing that we need to grow our economy is good wages, wages that match the New England average. Right now, we don't have that. Our wages are lower. So that's it for me. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. When I knock on doors, what I'm hearing the most problems with the four towns of Dresden, Pittston, Randolph, and Chelsea are taxes. Every single one of them, the people are overwhelmed with what they're paying in taxes. And I also hear a lot of people talking about housing, and they really resonate with talk about affordable housing and finding some different, more creative ways of planning our communities. And I'd like to see some innovative, out of the box thinking about ways to house more people in our communities. And housing more people could bring in more businesses and industry, and it could also lower our tax rates. So, like everyone else at the table has said, they're all important issues. And I think the biggest challenge for the government is to find innovative new ways to make a difference and how we face those issues.
Thank you very much. For the next question, it's actually about housing. So, housing in Maine has been an ongoing topic of conversation and media coverage. Is there a particular fact of the housing situation that you're most passionate about, and how would you hope to address it? And this time we'll start with candidate Pierce.
Thank you, John. So I'm a builder. We want to fix housing, make housing affordable. We need to lose some red tape. There's towns I won't build houses in. Brunswick's one of them. Dealing with their planning, their code officer, and their zoning, it's terrible. They waste a lot of time, and adds about $35,000 to the cost of a home. So if you want to build 10 homes, that's $350,000. That's not acceptable. That gets passed on to the consumer. Luckily, there's some towns you can work in still. Dresden's one of them. Woolwich is a good town to work in. Topsom, Bowdoin is, Richmond. So, but that doesn't follow the norm throughout the state. So we need to work on some of the red tape. The Maine Building and Energy Code, MUBEC as it's known, adds about $25,000 to a home. So you add the 35 and the 25, and you want to build a bunch of homes. Gets passed on to the consumer. So when we talk about affordable housing, we're passing all this red tape on to the consumer. Some of this stuff's good stuff. MUBEC could be improved, but you shouldn't repeal it. But some of the other stuff that's passed on through some of these larger towns, Portland, Lewiston, Bangor, these towns are terrible to work in. As a builder, we know this. And we just pass that cost on to the client. It's like everybody else. Building goods, cost of building materials, vinyl, steel, wood. Every time electricity goes up, we don't don't compete on the electric market or on diesel, we get killed. Diesel is set by, we have a 53-cent tax on diesel. Maybe we ought to have a diesel holiday just to help some of these building projects get off the ground, or work on the Clean Connect coming from Canada so we have affordable electricity for the mills.
Thank you. So there's a real balance to be achieved in Maine between home rule in communities, where communities set their own standards and their own zoning, and the state's control over building codes. So as Jeff was saying, there are communities where there's more red tape than others, but it's really not the role of the state to step on those communities. one of the things we have to be very careful about in encouraging building is continuing to allow home rule and community control in Maine. And while there are aspects of a building code that the state should look at very carefully, and certainly that was what happened in LD 2003. There are others that belong to the towns. I know for a fact that there was a great deal of concern in the island and peninsula communities when 2003 passed, because people were concerned that the limited water that's available in those communities would be used up by additional housing, and that more septic systems could pollute the ocean water that fishermen were needing. I believe that the role of the state is to incentivize building. I think that we have to do what we can do to incent companies to come in and build more housing, preferably dense projects like have been going up in some areas of Brunswick, actually, and also in Bath. Bath's been doing an excellent job building housing, both affordable and workforce.
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said about housing. But one of the things that wasn't mentioned, I learned about a couple of months ago, and that was modular homes that could be multifamily dwellings. And I see that as a good density, not building up kind of density, but building out and changing our communities, doing communities differently, so that, you know, maybe we could have some multi-unit modular homes that elderly people live in, and there's young people around too, so that it's a mixed use opportunity. And maybe you know, what we need is just every town, and I agree, you know, each town has the right to figure out their own zoning and how they want to do it, but finding some ways to think outside of the box and come up with some creative new ways of doing things could be helpful and valuable, and it would save us a lot of the issues with not having enough affordable housing, which is a problem that covers just about all of the other problems that we seem to have in Maine at this point in time.
So I don't necessarily agree with some of what was said right there. I look at LD 2003 as a state mandate that came down to the communities, and that I understand the purpose behind it, to build accessory dwellings, but you know, our tagline on the license plate is vacation land, and we didn't put a minimum time frame on that, and that actually opens the floor for extra vacation homes. I believe there should have been at least a 90-day minimum rental standard, which would create housing. Weekly vacations, not housing by any means. So I think that was not completed necessary on behalf of the state. You shouldn't put out an ordinance and leave it open-ended that really doesn't close the gap to create housing. That I don't think was done right there. I'm exceptionally passionate about housing. So I have a little prop here that I'll share. It's on the cover of my magazine a year ago. I put the University of Maine on the cover of it for a couple reasons. One, because I can, but two, they 3D printed a house. And I wanted to highlight Maine as a whole and show the world and the country how exceptional we are. But I also want to highlight the University of Maine. It was self-serving. My son's an engineering student there, and they've done some great things. And at that time, they had the largest 3D printer in the world, and they were able to 3D print a house in 6 days. And now, and I wrote about the story. If you read this here, it talks about how they're going to build 9 housing units in Bangor to support housing and for the homeless. And so there's things that we can do and build the state of Maine, but our communities as a whole, on how we can excel as a state, excel as communities, but also make sure that when we're creating housing or putting ordinances in place, that we cross the T's, dot the I's, and finish it for the people. Don't leave it open-ended that creates potholes that you all have to take care of after the fact.
Thank you all. Our next question is going to be talking about inflation and increased property taxes. Maynard's dollars are being stretched thinner and thinner. What can the legislator do to help alleviate the stress from both inflation and increased property taxes? And this time we'll start with candidate Tepler.
Thank you very much, John. I think that the legislature's responsibility to maintain revenue sharing is extremely important. During the time when revenue sharing was down to 3 to 3.5%, towns are really struggling with their budgets. And consequently, people's property taxes were rising rapidly. And since the time that the legislature has brought revenue sharing back up to the full 5%, things have gotten a little steadier. I wouldn't say there aren't property tax increases. That's certainly a problem we're facing in all our towns. And of course, it's exacerbated for elderly folks who missed a year of property taxes because of the law that held them steady. And then when they went back to paying property taxes 2 years later, they had 2 years worth of increases. And that was very difficult for some folks, I know. Property taxes are very difficult for the state to control per se. What we can do is provide our share of education, our share of your income taxes and your sales taxes. And that's the revenue sharing and the 55% of education. And it's really, really important that we maintain that and that we continue to provide for your schools, which probably are the most responsible for your property tax increases, and also for just increasing costs the towns face. And as the state's revenue increases, that 5% is also increased for all towns in the state.
Yeah, taxes are just, and inflation are just such a big issue. But I agree with what Denise was pointing out as far as the taxes and what can happen, needs to be happening with the state as far as moving that forward. But inflation is something that was the result of the COVID shutdown. And, Biden and Congress put a lot of money on the table to try and keep our process going forward. And I think that all that money, the ARPA money and the infrastructure money, has helped increase the inflation, but it's also increasing the jobs, and it's increasing, things that are making life better for people. And it's the Fed has kept the interest rates high, and that slowed everything that wants to move forward down. But the inflation rate is down to getting to be a normal rate, and the interest rates are starting very slowly to drop. And all during the beginning of the inflation, there was an awful lot of talk about a soft landing, a hard landing. We're going to have a recession. What's going to happen? And it seems like we're having the hope for a soft landing. And there are plenty of jobs that are available. But we need to be doing better in jobs and housing and all those things to make those better available. But we also need to look at the rest of the world. And the United States is doing better than any of the other countries in the developed world. And that doesn't help, Joe, who's living in Dresden, but it certainly can help what's happening surrounding all of us. Thank you.
So the economy is a challenge across the country, but certainly it is here in Maine as well. Our utility rates are off the chart. We are fourth highest in internet. Tied for fourth highest with 4 other states for internet costs, and we are tied for 10th highest for our cost of natural gas. So you look at some of these things it's not just electricity, but it's all of the utilities that we're faced with every day that we're trying to incorporate. into our living. And it's, we can't keep raising the cost of everyday expenses. And you look at some of the schools, there's been several school districts that have denied and not passed their budgets multiple times. And we can't keep raising the amount of this school budget. West Bath just went up significantly. We just did a reval this year, so not only did the school go up, but our reval went up, and it wasn't a terrific reval. We're trying to work through. We had so many abatements. We've got a whole other slew coming at us. And when you look at all the costs of taxes and trying to make ends meet, people are struggling, and we've got to find another way that we can answer their need on how they can pay the bills. I don't know where the money tree is. And if there is one, I'd love a one small seed from it to plant my own. But we just don't have the capacity to keep with the spending path. And we've got to find a way to lower our costs. And we're creating a disservice by, yes, we need to have higher wages, but every time we raise the wage for that, the cost of that service goes up as well. And I'm not sure, I don't want to ever pay $25 for a McDonald's hamburger. And so you look at as that trickles down and try to put in the boundaries of, certain benefits that come along across with small business. I agree that there's things that we need to do and better healthcare and stuff like that, but you can't make this happen for a small business, because if all of those demands happen and the business goes out or under, the individual who's hoping for those benefits loses their job. So there's got to be a balance that we find, and we're not there. We're very far from creating and finding a balance to make it work for everyone.
How can we help property tax is a question, and reduce taxes? First, we could fund homestead at 100% instead of 80%. Right now, the state of Maine has $600 million or so in reserve, which means they've overtaxed you. We should encourage business, again, to come here. I'm going to use this as an example. CMP, does anybody know how much CMP pays in property tax in the town of Dresden? What do they have for property at Dresden? They have telephone poles. They pay almost $50,000 in property tax on their telephone poles. So when you have businesses come and you encourage businesses to build, they pick up some of the property tax burden by being in town through their equipment, whether it's a skidder, a loader, an excavator, dump trucks. $8,000 to register a dump truck. You wonder why gravel costs so much, right? So when we start looking at taxes holistically, the school budget in Dresden is almost $1 million more this year. Comes from 1,800 taxpayers. It's a lot. So we really need to look at putting a cap on, going back to Prop 1, which was passed by a citizens initiative in 2005, which said the towns can't raise property taxes more than 2%. Really should happen. Again, if we don't encourage businesses and companies to come here, the tax burden is going to fall on all of you, and that's not fair.
You guys are flying through the question. Our
There you
next,
go, John.
our next question is one that's pretty near to my heart. Emergency services in the state have been hit with changes over the past few years, with potentially more on the horizon. Equipment, vehicles, personnel costs have all increased dramatically over the last few years, and local responders say proposed OSHA changes are threatening to have a large impact primarily on fire services. What is your view on the state of emergency services in Maine, and what role do you envision the legislature taking to address some of these matters? And this time we'll start with candidate Tunkel, and I need to apologize because I missed a sentence on my intro to say what towns House District 53 represents, which you did in one of your answers, but it's Dresden, Chelsea, Pittston, Randolph.
I don't really, in all the doors that I've knocked on, nobody has mentioned services like that, like the fire and the emergency. So I don't know, because I'm new to the legislature, to wanting to be on the legislature, I don't know an answer to that. And I haven't heard things from potential constituents to really give me any background to be able to base an answer on that one. So I guess I'm gonna have to move that one forward. Sorry.
We've certainly seen a lot happening in Brunswick, first of all, with the foam, which has created a significant problem with that. But I look at some of the gear and things that we have that I would never, ever put our first responders at risk. But I love to understand the shelf life of some of the equipment when a lot of it's not used on a regular basis, and they claim it expires, but there's not exposed to heat, not exposed to certain elements, but the pants or jackets are all of a sudden outdated. And those are significant costs and fees that I really want to understand better, because the towns are paying to replace that equipment. And I have a hard time really understanding if they're expiring in a set time frame with lack of exposure from fires or lack of wear and tear on them because they haven't been used, which is great because that means we're not having fires or safety issues. But that boils down and comes back to the town to have to pay that. But I also want to understand how the accident that happened on the base in Brunswick wasn't out in front of, and how if there were significant things that were raised and concerns about that they weren't addressed before the toxic foam was released, a significant amount of that. They were cited 3 separate times for faults in that system, yet nothing was done about it. And now we see the aftermath of that situation. And so how did that happen? You know, we're not paying attention to that or not staying on top of that as communities, and how the government that's responsible and the committees for that are responsible for that didn't ensure that the community was protected from that. We need to do better.
Bunker gear. It's what it's called, what firefighters wear. My father was a firefighter. He died from chemicals that he ingested while it's in service. He had 2 sets of bunker gear burned off him. So the life expectancy of your helmets, your jackets, and your pants is quite a bit. Your Scott packs, your air packs, unless they're exposed to extreme heat, they have a really good shelf life. OSHA's rule to mandate that all this stuff be replaced is going to crush every small fire department in the state of Maine. There's no way they can afford to replace this gear. About $3,000 to set up a firefighter with gear. You got 15 firefighters, 30 firefighters. It's going to crush top small town budgets. Ambulance services. Look, we're all in a rural town here, guys. You know, we contract out with Wisconsin, we've contracted out with Gardner, we've contracted out with different services, and we're always chasing who's going to provide the best service for the lowest price. We need EMTs. Where are we back? We're back to training again, guys. We're back to education. You know, this is just a fact like trucks. Some of these trucks, they have to pass what's called an ISO rating. Really, it's for the insurance companies that the truck has to pump so much water in so many times. Their hoses have to pass it, the firefighters have to pass these tests. With this act of volunteerism being down so much, and mandates coming out of the federal government, the state of Maine, for the OSHA rule, we need to have the legislature tell the federal government, no, thank you, we don't want your OSHA rules. But we need to also encourage our federal senators and House reps congressmen to say no.
In many ways, I actually agree with Jeff Pierce on this issue. It might be unusual, but for all of us, emergency services and fire services are absolutely critical for our communities. We don't want to see our houses burned down. We want to be able to call in the middle of the night and get transport to the hospital if we need it. This is a very complicated issue having to do with the number of volunteers that we have in our communities, the towns that actually have paid services for EMTs and firefighters, the contracts that we have with different organizations, as Jeff mentioned. So a lot of things are coming together in this issue, and it's very, very complicated. And the problem with the OSHA rules and the extreme costs that our small departments will face is one we have to grapple with. If we can say no, then okay, great, we can say no. But I'm not sure that I believe that that's really possible, because the rules are written by the federal government, and the state usually has to do what the federal government tells it to do. So what we have to look at dealing with here is possibly having the state pay some of the cost of this equipment replacement. Because if we can say no, that's great, but we might be looking at not being able to say no to the OSHA rules as they come down. And we want to preserve our emergency services, and we also have some complicated relationships having to do with insurance and emergency services that remain to be figured out.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the time and how many prepared questions we have left. So if everyone's okay, we'll add 1 minute to each response going forward. So you'll have 3 minutes for the remaining 3 topics.
What happens if we don't like the question?
Well, I mean, you can give an answer to whatever you want, but it'd be nice to stay on topic. The next question deals with education. Education is a topic on a lot of people's minds. It's a driving force behind a lot of the local budgets. What changes, if any, would you want to see the legislator take in regards to the public education system? And we'll start again with the candidate in Dresden.
So I'm not opposed to paying for education, but I want to make sure they're paying for the right stuff. And I touched on this earlier. We need to find a way to expand the opportunities for juniors and seniors in high school. Some of these kids don't want to go off to college. Not everyone wants that, and we need to find a way to get the trades and support them, and for the nursing and for all of the elements that come with the tech and vocational schools, welding, entry level to engineering, the electrical. Nursing, anything that goes along with automotive, we've closed those doors to 2 or 3 per school. That's not enough. We have so many kids that need the opportunity to find their career path, and that's what we have to certainly support that. But also the cost of education and how the town, we can't keep up with these increasing budgets every year. And we've looked at so many schools and towns, and there's several towns that are still trying to pass their budgets, and the community is just saying, no, we can't afford it. And not every state or not every town in the state is getting 55%. West Bath certainly is not getting our 55%. And so I think we made 6% in that scenario, which is way below that 55%. And a lot of the waterfront communities aren't receiving that same return from the state. So one, there should be a standard that I'd say a fair standard that we all receive from the state to try and subsidize the cost of the education, but we've got to find a way to reduce what it's costing. The administrative costs seem to be getting out of control. The building, how are we going to stay on top of the maintenance and repair of these things? There's no way to keep up with this with the taxation, and we can't keep raising the real estate taxes. We've got to find another way to, and we talked about taxing businesses, and we've got, when people come in here for vacations, if we have, I'll say, a use tax for vacation, that's not going to keep them from coming here, but it's certainly going to help the people that live here year round. And we need to find a way to subsidize other elements in this state and education that's not on the backs of all of our people that live here full time. And it's a disservice for us to keep reaching into their pocket and pay for all of these elements when we just can't keep up with the cost of it. You can have my other minute.
These guys don't want to get me down for 4 minutes.
I'm going to give it to you, Jeff.
Education, it's out of control, the costs, to put on the taxpayer. And again, I agree with Suzanne, I don't mind funding education, but when we're getting into the low 40s as far as proficiency in the country, we ought to really look what we've been doing, and maybe go look at some of the states that are, in the top 10. What are you guys doing? They seem to be affording their education. They seem to be affording their property taxes. What are they doing? Maybe there's some lessons to be learned. There's plenty of studies out there and state studies that are done. But these are things that really should happen. And I'm gonna go back, and you've heard me, and you're gonna hear me again, technical education. How many of our kids didn't wanna go to college? Didn't want nothing to do with it. They were in junior, senior year, they could get into a tech program, whether it be automotive, welding, carpentry, electric, computer sciences. All these heat pumps we have computers in them. All your new furnaces with gas-fired furnaces or oil-fired furnaces all have computers. Some of the latest and greatest technology, the Honeywell HQ program that runs your whole house and monitors everything to maximize your efficiencies. All take kids that went to tech school. So if they in junior, senior year go to tech school instead of college prep or what some of the other stuff they're teaching them, they can go out, they can come out and be an apprentice and work in the trades right out of school. It does a couple things. It gives them, I mean, Maine kids are great with their hands. It gives them a way to stop being out at night, gives them some money, gives them a start in life so they can build their own businesses. When I went to tech school, I went to vocational. I came out and at 23 started my own carpentry company, and I've been a builder ever since. Never worked for somebody else since I was 23 years old. I think I came out okay. You can ask my wife, she's in the back of the room. But these are things that we need to do to help our education. We need to get stuff that's actually going to move them forward so they can succeed. Whether it's going to college, if they go to college, that's great. But probably 65%, 70% of our kids ain't going to college, but we only have the capacity for 12 to 15% of them to go to vocational. Seems a little lopsided to me. Denise, you can have the rest of the minutes.
Well, oh wait, the end's gonna have a whole.
John, I'm actually going to ask you to please repeat the question because I need some clarity around it.
Sure. Education is a topic on a lot of people's minds. What changes, if any, would you want to see the legislature take in regards to the public education system?
Well, first of all, I need to say that as cliched as it is, our kids are our future. And education is enormously important, whether it's vocational education or any other kind of education that we offer publicly. So we've had in place for many years a system that determines how much money each school will get around the state. And it's a system that's extremely complex. The formula is very complex, and it works well for some towns, as Suzanne pointed out, and it doesn't work so well for other towns. But the purpose of the formula is to create equity across the state. So some of our towns can afford to tax themselves an awful lot for education. We have towns like Falmouth, where there's a lot of money and people can afford to tax themselves and their school gets really fancy. And then we have towns in the rest of the state where people can't afford to tax themselves that much, and it becomes more the state's responsibility to create some evenness with our formula. And right now, that formula doesn't address special education in the way that I think it should. And special education eats a very large share of our school budget. And I believe that the state needs to work on its formula to help cover the costs of special education that the federal government originally was supposed to help us pick up, but in fact does not help us pick up. So we get at least in the SAD 75, which is this district I know the most about, which is Bowdoin, Bodenham, Harpswell, and Topsham. And I'm missing another school because there are 5, right? 10? No, 4. Okay, 4 towns. The amount of money that the district gets from the federal government is about 17% of the budget. And yet all the mandates for special education come from the federal government. And that eats about 30% of the school budget. So I think that the state could be doing a much better job analyzing and figuring out the formula that it pays for schools around the state to create more equity and to help to deal with the costs of special education.
Thank you. I hear a lot knocking on doors, about education. And actually the people in Chelsea and Randolph and Pittston seem to be pretty satisfied with the education that their kids are getting. And people in Dresden are having, a harder time, dealing with that. So that's more, what I know about. But, and I also agree with what Jeff is saying about having better trade education and getting more kids figuring out younger, what it is they want to see about being when they grow up, not automatically going to school expecting to go to college. But, a good college prep curriculum is essential because not only do we need plumbers in this state, we also need doctors. And so finding a balance and finding some additional funding. I didn't realize that there was even the funding from the federal government that we're not getting as much as we could be or should be. But there's got to be, and I also think in the affordable housing, if we had more kids here, more families with children, and that increased our tax base, and we had more than 9 third graders in our school here in Dresden, that would make a big difference in helping make education more affordable at the elementary school levels. And then having some options that were closer than riding on a bus for a half an hour in order to get to high school for a lot of towns in Maine, not just the people in Dresden. That too could be really helpful. So balancing cost and quality and the needs of the teachers and the needs of the kids, especially the special ed kids. I hear an awful lot of them getting the short end of the stick. And that's not good for our society in the long term, because like Denise said, children are our future, and we need to be investing in that.
Can I add an additional comment, John?
You had about 10 seconds left on your time, so go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say that we already have a number of programs in place for students who want to go directly into the workforce. There's Jobs for Maine Graduates, which is a great program that a lot of our schools have. And I will say, Suzanne, that not every district only has 2 or 3 spots. I think you're thinking of the Bath district, and I believe we have more spots in Voc 10 than just 2 or 3.
I'll take my minute back.
Go ahead.
So you're entitled to your opinion. I believe that there's a significant shortage across the board for tech, not just in our district, but in the state. And I think, if we're going to subsidize our associate college students and give them free tuition, let's find a way to take that revenue down to our juniors and seniors in high school and invest in them as well. If there's a 529 program designed to help put money aside for students that your parents and family can put into. Let's find a way to take some of that money and put it into the juniors and seniors in our communities that don't want to go to college, that want to find an alternate education strategy that gives them a leg up on how they want to enter the workforce. There's not nearly enough time to give them for creating the tech and other alternate learning. Not every kid learns the same, and we need to find a way to answer whether it's school choice, whether it's finding a way to, and the money should follow the students in special ed, as they're changing communities. There's a lot of things that we can do to make sure the communities are getting a fair shake.
Any last nickels on this topic?
You got 6 seconds.
You've been timing me again?
So the last question before we go into our closing statements is, what is the biggest challenge you see in the Maine's healthcare industry? And what would you like to see the legislature do to address it? And this time we'll start with candidate Pierce.
Boy, that's a tough one. So, healthcare industry. First, we need to encourage doctors to come here, but who wants to come here as a doctor? We have low wages, we have hospitals that have low reimbursement rates. They're owned by big corporations. A lot of doctors don't want to. You look at our doctors that are here now, they're aging out. They're not taking new patients. They don't like the government healthcare. They're looking for private paid clients or clients that have good healthcare, good health insurance. I don't know. Here's not my Billy Wax, I'll be honest about that. But if you're gonna encourage doctors, dentists, and special needs doctors, or psychiatric doctors, mental health doctors, we need to have facilities, one, for them to come to that will actually pay them, and the reimbursement rates ain't low. You look at elderly housing, you know, they're nurse practitioners, there's no doctors in them because their reimbursement rates are so low. That's a federal government, a lot of that's a federal government thing, or they're owned by the corporate hospitals. I think there's 2 companies that own all the hospitals in Maine, something like that. Really, we have to get our economy back on track in Maine, so businesses come here. That brings all the professionals, brings your doctors, brings your tradespeople, brings your businesses, and it brings a base that will actually can pay a decent wage. So it's coming back to bring the economy back. It all revolves around that, whether it's electric costs, fuel costs, something that we have very little control over. We can control our electric costs. We had the Clean Connect corridor coming down from Hydro-Quebec. We could drop our kilowatt about 4 cents. That's a huge deal. So bringing it back to just having the economy better and having educated tradespeople.
So lowering healthcare costs is a very, very complex issue, but it's one that I'm really invested in and care about. I'd really like to see Maine people be able to see a doctor when they need one. I think that's very, very important. So recently, the federal government agreed that Medicare could negotiate prices with drug companies. And that has helped lowering the cost of certain drugs for people who are in the Medicare system. And I don't see why in Maine we couldn't request that we be able to match that pricing for our affordable care system. So I'd very much like to see us piggyback on the Medicare program that lowers drug prices, and I believe that we can. I also believe that we can get some more transparency on hospital costs. We know that we do basically have 2 supposedly nonprofit healthcare systems in the state, which own almost all of our hospitals. But we don't have a very clear idea of what the actual cost of being in any one of those hospitals for any particular procedure is. And so we can't really evaluate whether or not what they're asking is fair. And fairness in hospital costs is something that I'd like to strive for. I also think our insurers, our insurance companies, are very much in the business of denying our healthcare benefits, even when they shouldn't be. And I believe that we need someone who will advocate for consumers with their insurance companies or help them to understand when a denial is unfair and when they should fight it. And that could be an ombudsman for healthcare. We have ombudsmen for energy prices Why shouldn't we have an ombudsman at the state level for your health insurance costs? Thank you.
Finding a specialist in Maine is practically impossible. And even finding a primary care physician is very difficult. And as far as the hospitals are concerned, many of them are not breaking even because Medicare costs are so low. They're below what it costs to run a hospital, what it costs to pay a doctor. And so there's an awful lot of inequities that I don't think have much to do with the state. I like Denise's ombudsman for medical care. That seems like we do need to have somebody from the state who's overseeing and looking at what's happening and why is it so difficult to get specialists to come here? Why is it so difficult to get healthcare providers, period, to come here? And those things need to be addressed partially from the federal level, but also looked at from the state level and seeing what can be done to make things better in that area.
Right. So I think the negotiations actually just need to start farther back, and that's actually the cost of health insurance. We look at so my husband, we were on his health plan. He went on Medicare. My son and I had to find our own health plan. It cost us about $1,000 a month. And unfortunately, each of us had to receive medical attention that year. And our deductible was $67.50 per person. And we both also hit our deductibles that year. So we paid a significant amount of money for 1 year of insurance. And we rapidly went back on another health plan with his insurer, his company, the next year because we couldn't afford that. And when you look at small business in the state of Maine, most of all of the business in Maine is small business, and we need to find a way to provide good group policies for small business for our people in Maine. It should not cost me $1,000 a month for health care with a $6,750 deductible before I actually receive 1 penny back in insurance. That was a lot of money for us to pay for 1 year of coverage, and it's unacceptable. And no one should have to pay that. And our insurance costs are off the chart. We should, I think it's great that Medicare can negotiate drugs, but we need to negotiate our fees to all of the community. It's because it takes a long time to get to Medicare, and you deserve it after that point. But getting up to that point, we need to find a way that all of us can have a stable health plan, cost effective, find the doctors that we can go to. And it's just not working. It's too costly, and the state has to get involved. We can't survive this way. Every time we turn the corner, there's another fee for something, whether it's insurance, whether it's utilities, whether our school's going up. It's the rate of spending is going to outspend all of us, and we can't keep up with this. We've got to find a way that we can all live in our homes peacefully and enjoy what we've earned and survive as a community. We want to support our students. Education's important, but the healthcare needs of the state aren't being met. And we look at some of the mental health that we talked about. How can we make sure that we get out in front of that and find a way to address so we don't have another Lewiston situation? And how do we stay in front of that and make sure that our communities are protected and healthy and continue to be that way?
Thank you. So that concludes our prepared questions. So now we're going to move into our closing statements. So if everyone's ready, we'll continue. So Kenneth Tepler, would you kick us off, please?
Okay, I thought maybe it would be Judy first, but thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone being here and listening so carefully to all the answers that we've all given. I think some of what we heard is wishful thinking because the state only has so much ability to make things happen. For example, in the healthcare realm, we only control about 28% of the healthcare insurance market in the state. Everything else is federally controlled, and we can't get a handle on it as much as we'd really like to. So I will work as hard as I possibly can to bring down those healthcare costs that I can control. I will also work really hard to make sure our education system is as fair and equitable across the board, across the state as I can. I will work really hard to make sure that we can do everything that we can do to make sure your property taxes don't rise too rapidly. I will work really, really hard to do everything that I can to make sure that your community's EMS services and fire services survive and that you can count on being able to call a firefighter or an ambulance in the middle of the night. I will work really hard if you give me a call and tell me you're having a problem of a particular kind with the state to return your call and see if I can find a way to help you. I will be there for you as your senator if you choose to vote for me. Thank you very much.
Well, I've learned a lot tonight. This has been a very good opportunity for me. And I appreciate you all being there and listening. And yeah, learning from everybody at the table. The one thing that we haven't talked about that I do know is broadband. And I am really excited about the fact that Lincoln County and Woolwich got the grant that's going to enable every person who in the unserved places in Lincoln County and Woolwich to be able to get fast, affordable, reliable internet. And I think that once that's going in Lincoln County, we will be able to make a model that the rest of the state, as they are slowly getting their little bits of internet fastened to them, that we'll be able to see some improvement in a lot of areas, and including healthcare, with the ability to monitor people staying in their homes longer. Because they don't have to go to the doctor every time they feel, I don't know, their breath is short or something. And I think that it'll help with education, and I'm excited about the prospects of the affordable internet. And I'm also very encouraged because when I started working on the affordable internet, I knew absolutely nothing about it. But with a wonderful team of people, many of whom are here tonight, thank you, I figured out what we needed to know to get the grant. And I'm confident that when I get to the House of Representatives, that I will use that same ability to create a team and learn all the things that I need to learn in order to be able to be a legislator that will, like Denise says, work hard and make the difference for the things that people need. I guess that's where I am. I'm a beginner, I'm a learner, but I've got a track record for having changed careers 3 times and learned what I needed to do for that. And I'm really hoping that I'm gonna have the opportunity to learn to be able to serve the people of District Number 53. Thank you.
I'm exceptionally passionate about housing. I am probably the most suited candidate at this table to source that through investors across the country. I'm working with 2 investors right now to be able to be 200 and 500 workforce housing units. They came with their initial plan for 3 bedrooms, and I pushed back and said, it's really, we need to take those back to the studios and 1 bedrooms. By the time someone gets to a 3 bedroom, they're looking for a backyard, and we need to find a way to find housing with a larger spectrum. I wanted to take to the 500 unit housing project versus the 250. But that also goes into the, housing for the elderly. I think we need to find a way to really stabilize the real estate taxes and make sure that they can stay in their homes as long as they can. We should not liquidate their homestead and take it back in taxes when they pass. I am the reason why the Avita is on the base in Brunswick. I took the plot plan and took that down to Northbridge communities in Massachusetts and encourage them to build there. It was self-serving because my mom was in Anita in Westbrook, which is an hour and 15 minutes from West Bath, but I wanted her closer. And through that process, I learned about the tax incentives they had out there. They had a 10-year tax-free program, all of the utilities and infrastructure that located out there. And I think we should take those same tax incentives and encourage the investor. Find a way to provide them the same tax incentives to build housing in various markets throughout the state. There's a lot of ways we can do that and achieve that, and it's not off the cost of all of the communities. There's money put aside from the state to do this. They gave some to BIW and BAP. Let's take that money and disperse that around the state to find a way that all communities can find a way to build housing, the housing that they need, workforce housing, for our students graduating from college, for the hourly employees, for the BIW employees that can't find a place to live, that 600 came here to work and only 171 stayed. We need to find a way to grow our business, to grow our small business, find a way to make them survive and grow and prosper and find insurance that works for them, and really find a way to build the foundation for the state of Maine from the ground up with the businesses, with the healthcare, with lower taxes. We won't get businesses here if our tax rate remains where it's at today.
First, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight and spending the evening with us. So going to the State House requires a lot of working with other people, whether you agree with them or not, to build a consensus of what's good for 65 to 70% of Mainers, because 30% are gonna hate what you do anyways, and it's a moving target. My focus is on rivers, fisheries, which I've had a lot of experience with through the All White Harvesters of Maine. We've built a lot of fish ladders, we've restored a lot of habitat. So the other focus, so you gotta stay focused on a bunch of different things every day. Every day is a new project, every day is a new bill. Energy, one of my big passions. We gotta bring our energy costs down. We're gonna encourage businesses to come here to alleviate some of our tax burden. With that, we need to work on education. And we're gonna work on trade schools. We're gonna work on vocational schools. We're gonna work on bringing up our standards in our schools. That's another day. The next day is housing, right? We're gonna have housing days. We're gonna work on red tape. You know, what can we do to eliminate red tape? We don't want to tell communities what to do, but we don't want communities being so like the ADU law that was passed. It's a boondoggle for some towns, it's great for other towns. Gotta find common ground. Oh, the next day, we're gonna work on fire safety, we're gonna work on EMS. You know, we're gonna work on what we can do to keep our volunteerism and our fire departments in town. Oh, what are you gonna do at night? We're gonna answer calls to constituents. Because there's nothing more satisfying when someone calls you and you can find the person at the agency that's going to help them. And they get a call the next day, the agency helps them, they get their problem solved, and they call you and they thank you. That is so rewarding, and that's what we should be focused on when we go to the legislature. Every day is a new day. We got Allison Hepler out here, I'm gonna give her a plug. How many different things do you deal with in one day, right? So you have to, and then you have to build coalitions, because it's not all our side of the aisle or their side of the aisle. It's working together for what's best for Maine. Education, we have to bring up our test scores. We have to bring our education up in the state. We have to get vocational. We have to get a viable energy policy. It just has to happen. And then we can get businesses to come here because they want to be here and they can afford to be here. And that's eliminating red tape. I hope you vote for me, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
I think that this is a good time for and we're almost done. I have a few statements to talk about with the rest of our forum series. So on Thursday, October 3rd, the Boothbay Register editor Kevin Burnham is going to be hosting the third forum. It's going to be at the American Legion Hall in Boothbay, and will feature the candidates of House District 48 and Senate District 13. And then the following week, we will conclude with the last two forums held in Waldoboro and Damerscott on Monday and Thursday. I'd like to thank the audience first for coming out and being so respectful during our conversations. And I'd also like to thank the candidates for coming out and participating. And thank you all, and thank you for those who tuned in, and to the town of Dresden for allowing us to have this forum. So I'm sure some of the candidates might stick around for a little bit. If you have questions, please stay.
Thank you, young fella.